All right, so I'm going to go quickly through the Love to Ride series. I'm Sean Wilson. I'm the president of the Youth Cycling Association, and this is the summary slide deck for our preliminary analysis findings from the first portion of our needs assessment of our sport. So one of the overarching principles that came out of this first week of conversations is that if we look at an individual kind of going through the sport of cycling, if we look at their developmental age versus their capacity, starting from balance bike, pedaling bikes, going to some sort of training phases, and then competing and whatever they happen to do in the sport, there needs to be continuity in this process, and it needs to be driven by a curriculum. If you have breakpoints along this pathway, you're going to lose those individuals to other sports and doing other things. Let's break this down. So today we're talking about starting out with a foundation for athleticism. And Kristen Diefenbach took us through a lot of this stuff. Here we see little kids on balance bikes, and that's really what we're talking about today. That and the next step of actually just getting the kids from balance bikes and onto pedal bikes. But again, the main goal here is for them to have continuity in the programming and having a curriculum, and for them to be having fun. So the overarching principles of both of these age groups, and we'll talk about that in a minute, are you need to be very safety conscious. There needs to be strong risk management policies. It needs to be fun. And again, a curriculum. During this initial recruitment phase, which is pre-K and first grades, we're really targeting all kids that are out there, every kid that's going to be getting one of these push bikes, balance bikes. The programs need to be local to the kids, and they should be on some sort of closed venue. The goal here is the bike needs to be something fun for the kids to do. They need to want to do it and continue doing it. The other parts of this are you want to get the kids on the bike. You're exposing to the bikes for the first time. You're also introducing bikes to the general public, the parents. And this is part of a broader community outreach endeavor, which is going to be going counter to our ball-focused world, or especially in our society. So we're just trying to get bikes out there in the environment, and we want to show the parents that we have something to offer. We have organized programs that we can offer the kids at a very early age. When we think about the bicycle that they're using, it's a balance bike. We're not on pedals yet. When we think about the venues they're using, these are facility-based programs. Like I said, they're closed venues. They can be anywhere. Velodromes, public parks, schools, community centers, BMX tracks, pump tracks, other purpose-built venues, but they need to be safe. Who are your partners for these types of things? They're wherever the kids are. Schools are going to be your best resource. You're going to have 100% access to all kids if you can get into all the schools. But it's also community centers, parks and recreation programs, BMX, bike rodeos, fairs and shows, and then even things like rehabilitation programs for those who might have disabilities. When we think about the coaches that are running these programs, you want cool role models. So when we think about role models, these are enthusiastic, energetic, passionate young people. So teenagers, teenage mentors, and college students. But you can also include people that are school teachers, camp counselors, and even park rangers, anybody that's normally interacting with younger children. When we think about the coaching toolkits they need, it needs to be internal coach training for those specific curricula, and it's based probably in that local environment. And the curriculum that you're using is going to need to be very easy to teach, because a lot of times you're going to be working with people that don't necessarily have a lot of background in our sport. When we think about the activities they're doing, you really want the kids riding around, moving around. Fun is a real critical factor here. the specific activity doesn't really matter as much. But you also want to have very strong socialization and team building enterprises built into this. What you're really doing is building physical literacy. And when we think about the about the national guidelines, this should be part of a multi-sport program to gain that physical literacy. When we discussed the duration of these, they're about an hour for 1 day a week. If they're in a school, you're going to be doing them in some sort of block, but they can also be in a summer day camp type environment. And again, when we think about this from a national health perspective, you want to think about integrating this with other activities on the other days of the week, because the kids should be active every day. We talked a bit about costs, and it was brought up that there's a Strider program, all kids bikes, and it's about $4,000 to go into a school-based program. For local community programs that are professionally run, you're looking at about $12 per session. A lot of times those are done purchased in a block. So the scalable programs that we have, the ones that we discussed were allkidsbikes.com, and there's a screenshot for that. But then we also discussed local community programs that already exist at about $12 a session. When we talked a bit about retention, we think that you're going to be able to retain about 2% of those riders that come through those programs. And if we look at the numbers based on census data, you're looking at about 40,000 graduates per year that are moving from ages 4 to 6 up to age 7, which would be the next category. When we get into that next age group, now we're talking about elementary school kids, ages 7 to 12. Again, you're still, you have a lot of similarity with that initial phase where you're really targeting every kid that you can find in that local environment. And now what you're looking at is you're looking at both having closed venues as well as going into open venue formats. And we'll talk a little bit more about what those are. One of the things that does happen in this age group is that you start running into the diversity, equity, and inclusion issues, as well as socioeconomic status components. And they're really becoming compounding variables that are going to make things a little bit more difficult, or you're going to have other barriers to overcome. The goals, again, it's basically the same. You're equating the bike with fun activity. It has to be a positive experience. It's a holistic experience. We talked about having balanced body and mind, having balanced activities across different platforms. We also talked about including the entire family because, when we talk about our sport, really cycling can be a family activity. And then we talked about exploration or adventure riding. When we talk about the bike, now you're on a pedal bike. There's some real key considerations that were brought out. It needs to be appropriately sized, and the bike fit is really critical in order to ensure that these kids have a positive experience with the sport. The equipment needs to be age appropriate, but you also need to be considering having adaptive bikes available for those with disabilities. You're starting to get some concerns over the equipment costs, which go into that socioeconomic component that becomes more important as the kids get older and the equipment becomes more expensive. When we talk about the venues, again, safety is king, absolutely critical. On the closed venue side, it looks exactly like what you're doing with the with the push bikes, but now, they're going to be pedaling. And so, they're going to be able to push the boundaries a little bit more. And as they become older, you're going to be able to take them onto trail systems as well as onto the roads, which bring in additional safety concerns. When we talk about the Equitable Partners, it looks identical to the pedal bikes. It's wherever the kids are located. The coaches, it's the same group of coaches. You want these enthusiastic and energetic role models, and really you want them to be younger so that the kids look at them and want to be like them. When we look at that coaching toolkit, again, same idea as on the push bike. It needs to be internally derived, and it's a curriculum-driven approach. When we look at the activities, now we're getting a little bit more concerned that they're going to leave the sport of cycling and go somewhere else. So again, it needs to be fun. But in order to be fun, what do you have to do? There needs to be a variety of different activities that they do, and you need to have peer participation. So you want a lot of kids involved. You want older kids to be acting as leaders because those younger ones are going to be looking up to them. You want them to be part of their friend group, so you want them to be socializing. Again, you want them really riding around and less talking. You don't want to be giving them a lot of instruction. We discussed how there should be like one target goal for the day, and then you keep coming back to it while you have the kids riding around. And maybe you have an unstructured play format. There was some discussion about having leadership opportunities and doing community service, things that are related to teamwork and building that friend group. We had discussion about ensuring that you're building these kids to have road safety, which really helps them to become exploratory. They get to ride their bikes, have fun, and explore their environments, which goes along with a lot of the things with psychological development. You really need to have discipline-specific skills and safety components, such as for mountain biking or riding on the velodrome. When we're talking about the duration of these activities, now we can start expanding the amount of time that they're spending it and the number of days per week. When we're in the school system, this could be done in a block format, and you can have summer day camps to be able to really work on these things. There are quite a few existing scalable programs out there for these age groups. Pedalingminds.org is working on theirs. There's one that's available through Youth Educational Sports through Tana Ball. There's the iRide program out of Cycling British Columbia. There's Little Bellas, as well as things through Trips for Kids and we're guessing that there's other ones too that we don't even know about yet. When we look at the costs, things like iRide, you're looking at about $300 per day, and you want to do that over a several day block, so about $900 total. We don't have the cost estimates for Pedaling Minds or the YES programs in hand, but they're probably in that same kind of price range. But fee-based programs, now the costs begin to go up based on the length of time for the sessions. So they could be as high as $18 per session. And again, the kids would be registering in a block. We talked a lot about retention, and when we thought about this, we figured that you're going to be able to retain 25% of those kids that are now getting fairly well engaged with the process. So when we do the numbers, this works out to be about 10,000 graduates per year. They're now becoming teenagers and being fully engaged in the sport. So now we want to think about, we have these kids that are now starting to graduate. What should they look like? What are the key aspects of those kids? What do we want? What are we hoping to see in those kids that are coming through the programs and moving forward in our sport, and that are really going to go into some sort of what we would really consider a developmental process? There's one key aspect: desire. The kids need to want to be there. They need to choose to be involved. There needs to be social engagement with their peer group. They need to start being able to think independently. They need to be able to make judgment calls. And it's good if they already have the physicality so that they're with their peers. That's going to really help them with their desire. There's a lot of other elements that go into this too, but those are the key ones. Thank you very much for listening to this. And if you have any comments, these are working documents, and they are certainly open to being edited at the current time.